Hello, everyone. Now let's listen to the story. Your world once fit perfectly inside a sparkling snow globe. Inside was a cozy home, the scent of baking that filled the air every Saturday afternoon. The clear laughter of your little daughter Lily, and the image of David, your husband, smiling as he came home from a day's work. You'd give the globe a gentle shake, and the happy snowflakes would dance, dusting a glittering layer over the life you had spent your youth building. You were the guardian of that snow globe, polishing it every day, ensuring it was always bright and perfect. You remembered the mornings when sunlight streamed through the window, and you'd wake up in David's arms. The smell of the coffee you brewed was always the first thing to wake him. You would prepare breakfast, help Lily braid her hair, and send your husband and daughter off with hurried kisses. The house would then return to a quiet stillness, and you'd begin your work, cleaning laundry, planning for dinner. It wasn't a burden. It was love. A dedication you had chosen willingly. Friends sometimes asked if you ever got bored, if you ever regretted giving up your promising career. You would just smile. They didn't understand the joy of seeing a happy family, a successful husband, and a well-behaved child. That was your greatest achievement. But then, cracks began to appear on the glass of the snow globe. So small at first, you almost didn't notice them. It started with the late nights David spent at work. "This new project is really important, Jess," he'd say, his voice tired over the phone. You believed him. You would prepare dinner, reheat it again and again, and then sit alone on the sofa, waiting for the familiar jingle of his keys. When he got home, he'd just have enough time for a quick shower and a few bites before falling into bed, his back turned to you. You told yourself he was working hard for the family, for Lily's future. Then there was the phone. It used to be an inanimate object lying anywhere in the house. But now it seemed glued to David's hand. He placed it face down on the table, and the screen was always locked. A few times, when you accidentally walked into the room, he'd startle and quickly turn off the screen. "Just some work emails," he'd explain when he caught your curious glance. Doubt crept into your mind like a cold stream, but you quickly pushed it away. You couldn't let suspicion tarnish your perfect world. You trusted David. You had to. The last straw came on a Thursday afternoon. David said he had to meet a client and would be home very late. You put Lily to bed early, then decided to organize the closet. As you pulled David's shirt from the laundry basket, a strange scent, sweet and foreign, hit your nose. It wasn't your perfume, nor was it the fabric softener you used. It was the scent of another woman. At the same time, you saw a turquoise silk scarf, something you'd never seen before, tangled among the clothes. Your heart began to pound. Your hands trembled as you picked it up. It was soft, luxurious, and definitely not yours. An overwhelming sense of dread squeezed your chest. You collapsed onto the floor, the silk scarf in your hand, feeling like a cold snake. 1,000 scattered pieces suddenly clicked into place, forming a horrific picture: the late nights, the secret phone, the cold distance. You sat there, in the darkness of the laundry room, for who knows how long. When David returned, You were sitting silently in the living room, the silk scarf placed neatly on the coffee table. "You're still up?" he asked, his voice a little surprised. You didn't answer. You just looked at him silently, your eyes searching for a reasonable explanation, a convincing denial, anything that could piece back together the snow globe that was about to shatter. David's gaze swept past you, then stopped on the scarf on the table. The color drained from his face, a flash of confusion, then panic, and finally a guarded coldness. "That a colleague dropped it in the car?" he said, his voice dry. A clumsy lie. That lie hurt more than the truth. "A colleague?" Your voice emerged trembling, but filled with contempt. "A colleague named Chloe Wright." You had seen that name in a fleeting text message on his phone a few weeks ago. You didn't think anything of it then, but now the name felt like a knife twisting in your heart. David's silence was the answer. He didn't deny it anymore. He just stood there, guilt written all over his face. Your world, the sparkling snow globe you had cherished, slipped from your hands and shattered into a million sharp pieces of glass. The happy snowflakes stopped dancing. They melted on the cold floor along with your tears. "Why, David, why?" you whispered. But the question was lost in the vast emptiness between you. The confrontation had no screaming, no breaking furniture. There was only a dead silence, more terrifying than any rage. You looked at the man before you, the man you once thought was your entire world, and realized he had become a complete stranger. The love, the trust, your years of sacrifice, it all seemed like a cruel joke. That night, you lay in bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every breath David took beside you was torture. You felt more alone than ever, lost among the fragments of your life. The snow globe was broken, and you knew that no matter how hard you tried, you could never put it back together again. A storm had just begun. Dawn arrived not with warm sunlight, but with a cold gray light, a perfect reflection of your mood. You had barely slept. You just lay there, listening to David's breathing, each inhale now sounding like a lie. The next morning, you got up first, quietly leaving the bed. You couldn't bear to touch him. You tried to act normal for Lily's sake. You made smiley-face pancakes, poured milk into her favorite pink cup. "Mommy, why are your eyes red?" Lily asked innocently, her fork still in hand. Your heart ached. "Oh, Mommy, just watched a sad movie last night, sweetie," you said, your smile feeling frst and fragile. David walked into the kitchen, and the atmosphere instantly froze. He avoided your gaze, only greeting Lily before sitting down at the table in silence. Breakfast passed in tense silence, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware against plates. To Lily, it was probably just a morning where her parents seemed tired. To you, it was the beginning of the end. In the following days, your house turned into a silent battlefield. You spoke to each other, but only to exchange necessary information. "I'll pick up Lily today. We're almost out of gas." There was no laughter, no hugs. Love had left the house, leaving behind a cold void. David tried to talk. "Jess, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking," he began one evening. You just looked at him, an endless exhaustion filling your soul. Not thinking, you replied, your voice devoid of emotion. You called cheating on me for months, not thinking. You think an apology can just wipe everything away, David? He said nothing more. He knew no words could excuse his actions. Finally, it was you who said it. Your endurance had reached its limit. You couldn't continue living in a house filled with deceit and betrayal. You need to leave, David, you said one Sunday afternoon. Your voice was frighteningly calm. He looked at you, perhaps expecting a fight, but only saw cold determination in your eyes. The moment he started packing his things into a suitcase was one of the most painful of your life. Lily ran in, confused. "Where are you going, Daddy?" she asked, clinging to his leg. You took a deep breath, trying to hold back tears. "Daddy has to go on a long business trip, sweetie." You lied. The lie tasted like ash in your mouth. David bent down and kissed Lily's hair, his eyes meeting yours, filled with regret and helplessness. When the door closed behind him, the sound echoed through the empty house. You collapsed, holding a sobbing Lily, and finally you let yourself cry. Life alone began. At first, it was a relief from the suffocating atmosphere, but that was quickly followed by an overwhelming sense of emptiness and fear. Every burden was now yours. You heard David had been fired through your cousin Sarah. She said his emotional instability and distraction had caused him to make serious mistakes at work. He had lost everything: his family, his career. You felt no satisfaction. You only felt a deep sadness for the man who was once your everything. Now in a free fall, with no end in sight. His fall was worse than you imagined. The call came on a rainy evening as you were reading a story to Lily. It was the hospital. "Is this Jessica David's wife?" a nurse's voice asked. Your heart sank. "I'm his ex-wife. What's wrong?" They said David had collapsed on the street and was brought to the emergency room. His long-term, poorly managed diabetes, combined with stress and self-neglect, had led to severe kidney complications. You sent Lily to Sarah's and drove to the hospital through the white sheet of rain. You found David lying in a hospital bed, pale and frail. He looked like he had aged 10 years. He looked at you, his eyes full of shame. "I'm sorry, Jess, for bothering you with this." You said nothing, just quietly placed a bag of oranges on the bedside table. Whatever he had done, he was still Lily's father. You couldn't abandon him. The bills started to pile up on your kitchen table. The mortgage utilities, Lily's tuition, and now a thick stack of David's medical bills. The family's savings dwindled rapidly. Every night after Lily was asleep, you sat alone in the dark, staring at the numbers on your computer screen. A cold panic rose in your chest. You realized you were on the brink of a financial crisis. In the quiet of the night, a decision formed not from choice, but from absolute necessity. You opened your old resume, covered in digital dust, on your hard drive. The lines listing your skills and experience from years ago looked foreign. You had been a homemaker for too long. The world outside had changed. Would anyone want to hire a woman who had been out of the workforce for nearly 7 years? Fear and self-doubt consumed you. But then you looked into Lily's room, where she was sleeping peacefully. You knew you couldn't fall apart. For Lily, you had to fight. You took a deep breath, deleted the old headline, and began to type the first new words. It was the first step out of this free fall. You didn't know where you would land, or if you could land safely. But you knew one thing for sure. You wouldn't let yourself keep falling. You would learn to fly again. The free fall was over, but the ground you landed on wasn't a safe zone. It was a battlefield, and you were an untrained soldier. Dozens of applications you sent out were met with silence. Occasionally, you'd receive a cold, impersonal automated rejection email. On the rare occasions you were called for an interview, you sat in unfamiliar offices, feeling like an antique on display. The interviewers, often younger than you, would look at the 7-year gap in your resume with a look of pity. "So you were primarily a homemaker during this time?" they'd ask. And the question made your years of dedication feel shrunken into something worthless. The savings were running out. Desperation began to gnaw at your resolve. And then a call came. Brightway Insurance, a sales agent position. The base salary was shockingly low. Income was mostly based on commission. It was a high-pressure job completely unsuitable for a newcomer like you. But you had no choice. You needed a job. You needed money. You accepted. On your first day of work, you felt like you had entered another world. The sales floor was a noisy open space, filled with ringing phones and booming voices. Most of your colleagues were young, energetic, and dressed stylishly. You in your old, outdated suit felt completely out of place. And then you met your boss. She was Director Evans, a woman with a sharp, short haircut and eyes as keen as a knife. She didn't offer a welcoming smile. She just glanced at your resume and put it down on the desk decisively. "Here we don't care who you were," Mrs. Evans said, her voice steely. "We only care about results. Here's a list of potential clients. Don't disappoint me." You looked at the list. Most were old leads, people who had rejected the company multiple times, dead leads. It was a test. Mrs. Evans wanted to see how long it would take for you to quit. The first few weeks were a living hell. You had to make hundreds of cold calls a day, and what you got back most often was the cold dial tone of a hang-up. Sometimes you were even yelled at for bothering people. Each rejection felt like an invisible slap to your self-esteem. After a day of being emotionally and physically drained, you had to rush to pick up Lily, stop by the market, then go home to cook and clean. You had to push aside all your exhaustion, smile, and patiently listen to your daughter's stories from school. Many nights after Lily was asleep, you'd stand under the shower, letting the hot water hide your helpless tears. You felt like you were being stretched from all sides, about to snap. Your biggest challenge was a man named Mr. Sullivan. He was a major client, notoriously difficult and arrogant. No one in the office wanted to approach him. Director Evans assigned this task to you. Consider it an exercise, she said, without a hint of sympathy. The first meeting was a disaster. You had prepared meticulously, but when faced with Mr. Sullivan's scowl and condescending attitude, all your confidence evaporated. You stammered, forgetting what you had planned to say. He didn't even look at you, just glanced at your materials and tossed them back on the table. "Doesn't your company have anyone better to send?" he said, then dismissed you. You walked out of his office building feeling like the biggest failure in the world. But when you saw your reflection in the glass, a tired but determined face, you knew you couldn't give up. Giving up meant you and Lily would have nothing to eat. You didn't go back to see Mr. Sullivan right away. Instead, you spent nights researching him, not just his business, but him as a person. You read every article, every interview. You discovered he was an avid collector of antique watches and deeply loved his pet dog. A week later, you returned to his office unannounced. "You again," he snapped. "I told you I don't have time." "Mr. Sullivan," you said, your voice calm and clear, "I won't take more than 5 minutes of your time. I just wanted to say that the Patek Philippe Calatrava you're wearing is truly exquisite. It reminds me of the story of how a single craftsman can devote a lifetime to the pursuit of perfection." Mr. Sullivan froze. His expression changed from annoyance to surprise. He looked down at the watch on his wrist, then back at you. "How do you know about it?" You had struck a chord with his passion. The conversation that followed was no longer about your company's products, but about watches, about meticulousness, and the value of persistence. At the end of the meeting, he didn't sign a contract, but he said, "Send me a detailed proposal. I'll review it." You walked out of his office, your heart pounding. It wasn't just a glimmer of hope for a contract. It was confirmation that you could do this. When you reported back to Director Evans, she just raised an eyebrow slightly. "Adequate," she said. "Keep going." The words were brief, but to you they were more valuable than any praise. For the first time, you felt you had earned a sliver of respect in this place. In the following months, you still faced countless difficulties, but something had changed. You were no longer afraid. Each rejection didn't break you. It just made you find a different approach. Every difficult client was a complex puzzle you were determined to solve. You worked like a moth to a flame, learning everything you could. The fire of the business world didn't burn you up. Instead, it was forging you, burning away the weak outer layers to reveal a core of steel you never knew you possessed. You were still tired, still had to worry, but now there was another fire within you, the fire of self-reliance and purpose. You were no longer a woman who depended on others. You were reforging your own life. As time passed, and the fierce fire of the marketplace no longer scorched you. It had become a part of you, an internal source of energy. You had grown accustomed to the frantic pace of your job. You were no longer the newcomer trembling before every call. Now, you were one of the top sales agents in the department, someone whose competence even Director Evans had to acknowledge. Your life had settled into a new rhythm, days filled with tense negotiations and challenging sales targets. Evenings in the peaceful world of you and your daughter, with fairy tales and simple meals. You were tired, but content. You had rebuilt your life from the ashes on your own. And then, in the midst of that rhythm, a new gentle breeze began to blow. You met Mark on a sunny autumn afternoon at the school playground. His son Leo and Lily were inseparable best friends. While the children chatted away, you two started having casual conversations. He was an architect, a single father who had been divorced for a few years. Mark exuded a calm, warm, and reliable aura. He listened to your story not with pity, but with genuine admiration. "You're so strong, Jessica," he said, and that compliment, coming from someone as composed as him, carried a special weight. Your relationship developed naturally. From chats at the playground, it progressed to coffee, after dropping the kids off at school, then to weekend dinners with the two children. Being with Mark, you felt at peace. There was no painful drama, no old wounds. There was only respect, understanding, and a sense of security you hadn't felt in a very long time. A trip to Disneyland together was a wonderful memory. Watching Lily and Leo laugh and play together, seeing how patiently Mark explained everything to the kids. A sudden thought popped into your head. A family could look like this, happy and effortless. And then David re-entered your life, not like a hurricane, but like a persistent drizzle. After getting out of the hospital, he had found a new, more modest job in a lab that seemed to suit him better. He had changed. The arrogance and thoughtlessness were gone, replaced by a quiet remorse. He began to take his responsibilities as a father seriously. He picked Lily up on time, played patiently with her, and the child support was never a day late. He started showing up more, not as a demanding ex-husband, but as a friend. A light bulb burned out in your house, and he came over quietly to fix it. You came home late from work, and he had already bought dinner for you and Lily. He didn't use flowery words. He just acted. He told you about his research, his failures, and his small hopes. For the first time in years, you truly listened to him. You saw a different David, a man who had been knocked down by life and was trying to get back up. Your heart was torn in two. On one side was the peace, warmth, and bright future that Mark offered. He was a safe harbor after the storm. On the other side was history memories and the image of a complete family that David was trying to mend. He was the storm that had passed, but its echoes remained along with a promise of healing. The struggle came to a head during one fateful week. On Friday night, Mark took you to a fancy restaurant. Under the flickering candlelight, he took your hand. "Jessica," he began seriously, "I've been thinking a lot. My company wants to transfer me to the European branch for the next 5 years, and I want you and Lily to come with me. Let me take care of you and Lily. Let's build a new family, a new life together. Will you marry me?" He opened a velvet box, inside of which was a simple but exquisitely crafted ring. It was an offer of a life you never dared to dream, of stable, prosperous, and free from worry. Just 2 days later, on Sunday afternoon, David came to pick up Lily. While she was playing in her room, he lingered in the living room, his face tense. "Jess," he said, his voice trembling, "I know I don't deserve to say this. I was a terrible husband and father. I destroyed everything. But for the past 2 years, I've lived with regret every single day. Losing you and Lily was the worst thing that ever happened to me." He knelt before you, an act you could never have imagined from the old David. He took out another box. Inside wasn't a new ring, but your original wedding band, which he had kept. "I had it repaired. Jess, I can't promise a life of luxury, but I promise to spend the rest of my life making it up to you to love you and Lily. Please give me a chance to fix everything. Please marry me again." Within 3 days, you received 2 marriage proposals. One promised a brand new future. The other begged to mend the past. You were no longer the one being pushed around by life. Now, you were in the driver's seat, facing 2 completely different roads, and both seemed to lead to happiness. But which happiness was truly yours? The question hung in the air, demanding an answer, not just from your mind, but from the depths of the woman you had become. In the days that followed, you walked around in a daze. 2 movies played on a loop in your head, each showing a beautiful vision of the future. The first movie was bathed in the warm, golden sunlight of Europe. You saw yourself and Mark with Lily and Leo strolling through a park of falling autumn leaves. Life was easy. You no longer had to worry about bills, no longer had to stay up all night chasing sales targets. You had a kind, reliable man by your side, a new whole family. It was a peaceful harbor, a well-deserved reward after all the storms you had weathered. It was the path of safety and serenity. The second movie had the familiar colors of memory. You saw yourself and David taking Lily to school together. David was no longer the distant man of the past. He was laughing in his eyes when they looked at you, and your daughter were full of appreciation. In the evenings, the family gathered around the dinner table, the atmosphere as warm as if the separation had never happened. The old wound was healed. The broken family was mended. It was the path of forgiveness, of giving the past a second chance to be right. Both paths were tempting. Both promised happiness. You spent many sleepless nights trying to weigh the options, trying to figure out which choice was the right one. One Saturday evening, after Lily was sound asleep, you sat alone in the living room, flipping through the business reports and contracts you had secured over the past 2 years. You looked at the numbers, the client names. Each number wasn't just money. It was a story of effort. It was the rejected calls, the late nights of research, the humiliation of being dismissed by Mr. Sullivan, and the overwhelming pride when you finally earned his nod. It was the late but precious recognition from Director Evans. And then a truth emerged so clear it took your breath away. The most precious thing you had gained from all these events wasn't the peace Mark promised, nor the mended family David longed for. The most precious thing you had gained was the person you were today. A woman who had pulled herself up from the deepest despair, who had taught herself how to fight, who had found her own worth and strength. You realized that both of the other options, as wonderful as they were, required you to give up a part of that person. By going with Mark, you would once again become a woman who was sheltered and cared for, and the fighting spirit within you would slowly fade. By returning to David, you would be pulled back into the role of a wife in an old, albeit renewed, family structure. Both paths defined you through your relationship with a man. But you didn't want that anymore. You didn't want to give up the woman you had paid for with so many tears and so much sweat to create. The next day, you met with David first. You gave him back the wedding ring. David, you said, your voice gentle but firm. I forgive you. I'm truly glad you've changed and become a good father to Lily. But we can't go back. The woman you want to remarry no longer exists. She was left behind in the wreckage of our old home. Let's be friends, co-parents, who raise Lily to be the best she can be. Tears rolled down David's cheeks, but he nodded. He understood. The conversation with Mark was harder. He was a good man. He didn't deserve to be hurt. You met him at your usual coffee shop. Mark, you began. You are one of the most wonderful men I've ever met. Your offer is a dream, but I can't go with you. He looked at you confused. Is it because of David? No! You shook your head. It's because of me. 2 years ago, I lost everything. And in the process of getting it all back, I found myself. I like the person I am now, someone who can face challenges on her own, who can create her own value. I can't give that person up, not even for the most beautiful dream. I need to see with my own strength just how high I can fly. Mark was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled a sad but respectful smile. I understand. I fell in love with you for that strength, so I could never ask you to give it up. Good luck, Jessica. You had made a third choice, one that wasn't on the list. You chose yourself. A few weeks later, you stood before a new office door, a plaque bearing the title Sales Director. After turning down both men, a major career opportunity had opened up. You accepted it without a moment's hesitation. You looked at the young team waiting for you, and you no longer felt the fear you had on your first day at Brightway Insurance. You only saw a new challenge, a new sky to conquer. That afternoon, you picked Lily up from the park. Watching her play happily in the golden sunlight, your heart filled with a complete sense of peace. This peace didn't come from a promise or from being protected. It came from within. You suddenly remembered the fairy tale of the ugly duckling. You realized that the most beautiful story isn't Cinderella finding her prince, but the ugly duckling realizing she was always a swan. And you, Jessica, were that swan. You had survived the long, dark winter on your own, and now you were spreading your strong wings, ready for the vast sky ahead, a sky that was all your own. If you found this story helpful, please like and subscribe to Porchlight Diaries, Saku Family Stories, so I can keep sharing. Comment where you're watching from and which part touched your heart. Maybe it'll send a little hope to someone who needs it today. Thank you for listening with such kindness.